Albert Einstein famously said, "The true sign of intelligence is not knowledge, but imagination." The very world of science and research is dramatically shifting with the emergence of generative artificial intelligence. With Google's NotebookLM as well as many other tools, we are forced to revisit the meaning of knowledge, innovation, and creativity.
Welcome to the Grand Challengers Podcast, a show about inspiring individuals who are stepping up to tackle the global challenges that our world is facing in their own unique ways.
This is a special mini-series on Google's NotebookLM, featuring previous guests from the show and insights into the potential and perils of generative AI in science and research.
Join us on not only this little experiment, but also some deeper dives into key topics we have covered on the show so far.
From urban nature-based solutions, climate change, urban planning, ecology, livability, and even perspectives on AI in our urban environment as well.
AI is here to stay, accessing our vast collection of human knowledge, summarizing and synthesizing it, and presenting us with generated words, images, videos, voices, and much more. So join me, Peter Marcus Bach, and my guest on today's episode, João Paulo Leitão, on this journey as we explore just how well AI can distill an in-depth review on different blue-green systems, both infrastructure and practices for cooling cities. Please enjoy.
So, João, welcome back. It's only been recently since we had you on the show for the second time. This is not the third time I promised, because I did say I was going to bring wine, but no, I meant the third time for the actual episodes.
That's fine. Thanks, Peter, for inviting me for this nice experiment. I would call it an experiment.
Yeah, it's definitely indeed an experiment. And yeah, I'm very curious to see what comes out of it, because as you've probably read and used in the news and on the internet, AI has been gaining a lot of attention, especially generative AI.
Well, I'm really amazed with the things that this generative AI can create, because this is a creation task. I've been using these tools a couple of times, and I'm really impressed with the quality. So my experience was just put off some of my slides from one lecture into NotebookLM.
The tool we're about to look into.
Yes. And then see the result of the podcast it creates automatically out of the slides.
I guess it's been around long enough that many would have tried that. And that would have been the one feature that I think would have interested everyone the most.
It's amazing. So this was my experience. So the next step I'm waiting for is that for the podcast to hear my voice there.
Oh.
But it shouldn't be that far from this thing, because it's a matter of spectrum of noises and to try to mimic this thing in the NotebookLM.
It's just a matter of feature integration, because as far as I know, there are tools that can do that already.
Yeah. So we're not far. The second point I would like to make here. My wife one day came home and said, well, I was in the theater, and then there was two young ladies just behind me talking about, have you studied for this discipline, for this lecture? And, one said, no, I didn't have the time. And then the other said, what I've done? So I put the notes and the slides in an AI platform, most likely NotebookLM.
Most likely.
And then, I don't have the time. I was just listening to the podcast.
Yeah.
And I'm studying for this lecture based on this podcast. So, wow, cool stuff.
It's crazy how our world is changing with the rise of AI and the emergence of so many different tools. So, shall we get into it?
Yeah, let's see, without knowing the podcast that we're going to comment or follow for the next few minutes. And my question is always, how correct or incorrect are these things? Because from my experience, relatively small experience, it works really well.
Yeah.
It includes things that are not necessarily in the slides explicitly. And sometimes it can just deviate a little bit from what we have in the slides and from what is really true. But let's see.
So, how it works, listeners. So in episode 1, we had Lucas Scobati, and we did this experiment once already. And we are now going to do this together with a paper that we've co-written. This is actually the paper we discussed on João's recent episode 40, and is a literature review on blue-green infrastructures for urban heat mitigation.
The full paper is titled Blue-Green Systems for Urban Heat Mitigation, Mechanisms, Effectiveness, and Research Directions, authored by Noemi Probst, myself, Lauren Cook, Max Maurer, and yourself, João. Published in Blue-Green Systems, Volume 4, Number 2, in 2022.
And it includes quite a lot of different details. This paper has been run through NotebookLM, so it's the only source uploaded. NotebookLM is an AI tool from Google that helps with research, with doing knowledge distillation, summaries, things like that. A language model that helps us, I guess, sort through large amounts of text data. So I've run this paper through it and generated that so-called podcast, and we're going to listen to it. Neither of us have heard it. So you're going to be hearing our live reactions. And yeah, after that, we'll discuss it a bit and see what happens. Are you ready?
Ready to go.
All right, ready to dive into some cool solutions for hot cities.
Sounds refreshing.
We're talking blue-green systems, and it's way more than just planting trees.
It really is. Think of it as weaving nature and engineering together to combat those rising urban temperatures.
So not just your typical park in the city.
Not quite. We're talking green roofs, strategically placed ponds, even parks that create their own microclimates.
I'm picturing cities designed as these cool oases.
Exactly. And the science behind it is fascinating. This 2022 paper by Probst and their team, published in Blue Green Systems, really dives into the nitty-gritty.
Okay, so what's their main focus?
Well, they move beyond that simple city versus country temperature comparison.
Right, because we all know cities are generally hotter.
Exactly. But Probst and their team, they get into the why behind those temperature differences within cities themselves.
So looking at those heat maps and figuring out what's making certain areas hotter than others.
You got it. They break it down into heat sources and sinks within the urban fabric.
Good. Perhaps first stop now. Spot on. The focus of the study, I think, because we try to avoid these heat island, these cores, so cooler in rural areas, hotter in cities.
I mean, that's something that I was just seeing over and over and over again. And I thought, okay, this has been overdone, over-communicated. We need to think of this differently. So I'm glad that they caught that. I think I'm a bit more shocked that, I mean, in the last episode, I was shocked about the sound effects that they put in, including the breathing. But I'm even shocked that they got the name right.
Yes.
They attempted to pronounce Noemi's name, and that's pretty amazing.
It is good. There's not much to add here. I just wanted to say that exactly they really picked up the core thing from the beginning. Maybe these things come out from the abstract. Could be. I don't know exactly how the structure of the AI, the generative algorithm works, but congrats.
Indeed.
Good start.
We're congratulating the AI.
Yes.
But indeed, I think they even did the puns and the analogies better than us.
Yes.
To begin with. Very refreshing to see, at least. Let's keep going.
Okay, so it's not just cities are hot. It's about understanding the dynamics of heat within a city.
Exactly. Anything that releases heat is a source, like traffic or industry. Even the materials we use, like concrete and asphalt, they all pump out or radiate heat.
That makes those red zones on the heat maps make a lot more sense.
Right. And on the flip side, we have heat sinks. Those are the elements that absorb heat and create a cooling effect.
So that's where blue-green systems come in.
Precisely. Parks, green roofs, water bodies, they each have their own way of lowering temperatures. It's like creating a network of cool zones throughout the city.
So strategically placing them to maximize their impact, not just plopping down a park wherever there's space.
Exactly. Placement and connection are key. Think of it as a citywide cooling strategy, not just isolated solutions.
It's like weaving a cool green fabric through the city.
I like that analogy. That interconnectedness is crucial for making these systems work.
I remember when we were writing this paper, we spent a lot of time on trying to define blue-green infrastructures.
We ended up calling it blue-green systems.
Yeah, it was based heavily on the EU definition of green infrastructure. And I think we added in especially the strategic intent, because otherwise you end up calling everything a blue-green infrastructure.
Yeah. The other concept that we tried to bring into the paper was this concept of sinks and sources, or sources and sinks, which I think it's really important to try to plan the city or plan or find solutions for heating the city.
Indeed. No, definitely. And that they touched upon that. Lucas and I discussed this on the first episode of this mini-series, and that was that we have this feeling that the AI works based on a sequential structure of the paper. So a lot of what we're hearing now is actually what it's gaining from the abstract of the paper. So I'm curious to see if this is going to be repeated later on, because of just the nature of the paper itself. Where I guess it's different from the previous episode is that this is actually literature reviews. So I'm curious to see how they now weave it together.
Okay, so we've got our heat sources and sinks, and we know placement matters. But how do these blue-green systems actually cool things down?
Well, there are a few key mechanisms at play. One of the most important is evaporative cooling.
Ah, yes. That makes sense, like when you step out of a pool on a hot day and feel that instant chill.
Exactly. When water evaporates, it takes heat energy with it, cooling the surrounding air. Water bodies in the city contribute to this, but even plants releasing water vapor play a role.
So even something as simple as a lawn can make a difference.
Absolutely. Through transpiration, plants release water vapor, cooling the air around them. Scale that up to a park, and you get what's called the park cool island effect.
I've definitely felt that walking into a park on a hot day. It's like stepping into a different climate.
Exactly. And the cooling isn't limited to the park itself. It can extend outwards, depending on the park's size, shape, and the surrounding urban environment.
So it's not just about having a park. It's about how it's designed and where it's located.
Precisely. Even the shape of a park can influence its cooling effectiveness.
I wouldn't have thought of that. So a circular park might be better than a long, narrow one?
You got it. A circular shape can distribute that cooling effect more evenly.
So much for just plopping down a patch of grass and calling it a day. This is way more strategic than I realized.
It really is. And that strategic thinking needs to extend to other cooling mechanisms as well, like shading, for example.
That one seems pretty straightforward. Trees, buildings, green roofs, they all block sunlight from hitting surfaces. So less heat absorption, right?
Exactly.
Something that caught my attention here on these AI podcast. They use a language that really motivates the listener to follow the storyline.
That's true.
They bring some basic examples to really illustrate what they are talking about or what we have included in the paper, perhaps in a more difficult language.
Yeah, we're recording this in the middle of winter, and the pool example just makes me wish it was summer right now.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And so far, I mean, pretty much says what we expect. We talked about the heat sources and the sinks. We went into the mechanisms. They're about to cover shading.
Basically, they are going, I would say, step by step on what we have in the paper. And it's interesting. I cannot say this thing from the top of my head. They are touching upon the different characteristics of the different mechanisms or the different solutions. Indeed. But at least they go on to describe some aspects that we found in the literature, that the shape of the parks or the size of the parks do have an impact.
Yeah. And I guess it's also good to remind yourself of when you're designing these solutions. It's not just what solutions, but how you end up shaping them, planning them. Let's keep going.
And not only does that lower temperatures, but it also makes those urban spaces more comfortable for people.
I'm thinking about those narrow streets downtown where the buildings trap heat. Some strategic shading could make a big difference there.
Absolutely. And that's where those impressive vertical gardens and green walls come into play.
Oh, yeah. I've seen those popping up more and more.
They're becoming really popular, especially in those dense areas where there's limited ground space.
So they're like a natural cooling barrier built right into the walls.
Exactly. They absorb heat, they provide shade, and they release water vapor, just like their horizontal counterparts.
I'm starting to rethink my own neighborhood. I'm noticing all these places where some strategic shade could make a big difference.
It's all about looking at the city with a fresh perspective. And speaking of things that can make a big difference, let's talk about green roofs.
Those are becoming increasingly popular. Are they as good for cooling as everyone says they are?
They really are multitaskers. They reduce stormwater runoff, they improve air quality, but when it comes to cooling, they act like giant sponges.
Sponges? I'm intrigued.
They absorb rainwater, which then evaporates, cooling the air. Plus, they insulate the building below, cutting down on the need for air conditioning.
So it's a win for the building itself and the surrounding environment.
Exactly. It's a great example of how we can integrate nature-based solutions into the built environment to make cities more sustainable and resilient.
Nature-based solutions. I guess we did throw in a few terms into the paper, but it's nice to see they're weaving it into the storyline.
Yeah. And I don't remember this discussion about indoor and outdoor environment. Maybe it's there. I cannot really say, but I don't remember that we have had these advantages or these opportunities for indoor cooling or heating. So I don't know, but I find it really interesting.
If anything, mentioned in passing, but certainly not.
It was not.
We didn't spend that much time on it.
No, it was not the focus of the paper, the indoor environment.
Although we did explicitly say we were going to focus on the outdoor, and maybe that's the trigger for it.
Could be, yeah. And
AI works in mysterious ways.
It is true. Well, up to now, it's okay, and in a very, as I said before, easy language.
True. And the analogies, I must say, this is only the second episode, but I've heard some pretty amazing things so far that it's used as comparison. So, certainly if you ever think of using NotebookLM, you can use it to at least get some really nice analogies for explaining to people.
Analogy generator.
Yeah, true.
But I'm guessing there's more to it than just throwing some plants on a roof.
Oh, absolutely. There are definitely specific design considerations. Things like the type of soil, the plant selection, even how the roof is irrigated, all play a role in maximizing its cooling effectiveness.
It sounds like there's a real science to it.
There definitely is. And that's what I find so exciting about this field. We're constantly learning more, refining these systems, and finding new ways to maximize their benefits.
Speaking of learning more, the research mentioned some less studied green systems like vegetated swales and bioretention systems. What are those exactly?
Think of them like mini wetlands integrated into the urban landscape.
Mini wetlands.
Interesting.
In the middle of the city.
Yep. They're designed primarily to manage stormwater runoff, but they also have a cooling effect.
Through evapotranspiration, just like the other vegetation we've been talking about.
Precisely. But they're less studied, so there's still a lot we need to learn about their full potential.
So more research is needed to figure out the best designs and how effective they can really be.
Exactly. But there's definitely a lot of promise there.
Okay, we've covered parks, vertical gardens, green roofs, and even mini wetlands. I'm starting to see how strategically combining these different systems could create a pretty powerful cooling network throughout a city.
That's exactly the idea. It's about moving beyond isolated solutions and embracing a more holistic approach to urban greening.
I'm seeing your eyes go wide. You're shaking your head in disbelief.
Yeah, because looking back, something that we've discussed while writing and preparing this paper was this idea of city planning, space and planning. And again, this pops out as one of the aspects that are in the paper.
Yeah.
This how to combine different solutions, how to bring them into the cities and so on. Referring to the example in the theater, studying using a podcast created by NotebookLM.
Yeah.
It is great, but it's very superficial.
True.
But the specific aspects are there. As an engineer, that in many situations we think about designing, it's a millimeter or a centimeter or 2 meters or 3 cubic meters. Perhaps these sort of tools do not bring us there to this level of design.
Yeah.
But to give an idea about solutions, different types of solutions, the different ways these solutions work, here we have a good example based on the paper that we've written that we can learn something about the topic.
I guess, as you said, superficial level for someone with not much knowledge on it, it would be the perfect tool to get into the topic.
It's an entry point.
Definitely.
And that brings us to another critical element in the blue-green toolkit, right?
You got it, water.
All right, let's dive into that. I'm already picturing those refreshing fountains in waterfront parks, but I'm guessing there's a lot more to it than just aesthetics.
Oh, definitely. Water plays a huge role in cooling our cities, and science behind it is fascinating.
So spill the secrets. How does water help beat the urban heat?
Well, you hit the nail on the head with refreshing. We naturally gravitate towards water on hot days, and there's a reason for that.
It's just so inviting.
And it all comes down to, you guessed it, evaporation.
Right. Just like with the swales and the plants. As the water evaporates, it absorbs heat, cooling the surrounding air.
Exactly. It's like nature's air conditioner.
So when it comes to urban water bodies, is bigger always better?
That's a great question. While large lakes and rivers can have a big impact, smaller ponds can also be incredibly effective.
Especially when strategically placed.
Exactly. It's about creating a network of cooling points throughout the city, not just relying on one big source.
So once again, it comes down to that strategic design and placement.
I'm waiting for the moment they say something about daytime and nighttime regarding water bodies. Let's see.
That's true. Yes, anticipation. Let's see how they pick up on that.
But there's more to water than just ponds and fountains, right? What about rivers, for example?
Rivers definitely add a whole other layer to the equation. Some researchers believe that the flow of water can actually help transport heat away from hotter areas.
So a river could act like a natural cooling conduit through the city.
Exactly. And factors like the water temperature, flow rate, and even the vegetation along the banks can all influence that cooling effect.
It's all connected. It's amazing how these systems work together.
It really is. And let's not forget about those constructed urban wetlands.
Oh, yes, I've heard about those. Are they basically man-made versions of natural wetlands?
Pretty much. We create these shallow, vegetated areas that mimic a lot of the functions of natural wetlands.
So they help manage stormwater, provide habitat. But what about their cooling power?
That's still an area of active research. We know they enhance evapotranspiration and can reduce surface temperatures, but we need more data to quantify their effectiveness and optimize their design.
I think that's one thing we noticed recurring over and over again in the paper, that there are certain systems that are sort of the usual favorites for urban heat mitigation, but we made a point to say we have different blue-green infrastructures as well, and we need to better understand their potential, because when it comes to designing these kinds of systems, multifunctionality is really the way forward.
Yep, they touched upon this multifunctionality.
Yeah.
But I think they missed the daytime and the nighttime. Let's see.
You're really wanting to hear that.
I'm not sure. I have no clue.
I mean,
Curious.
They did surprise Lucas and I on the previous episode, but they did miss one or two things we thought they would talk about.
Yeah.
So I guess it's time to place your bets.
Yep, I don't know.
Yeah, let's see.
Sounds like there's still a lot to learn about these mini wetlands.
There definitely is. And while we're talking about water's cooling potential, we can't forget about those smaller scale features you often see in cities, things like fountains and sprinklers.
Yeah, those are everywhere. Do they really make a difference?
They might not have the large scale impact of a lake, but they definitely create a more comfortable microclimate.
So those little bursts of coolness do actually help.
Exactly. Fountains disperse water droplets into the air, which then evaporate and cool the surrounding area. And sprinklers, by wetting down those hard surfaces, temporarily reduce their temperature and enhance evaporative cooling.
I'm starting to see how all of these elements, from ponds to parks to even well-placed sprinklers, can work together to make a city more comfortable.
Exactly. It's about a layered approach, using all the tools in the blue-green toolbox.
And we can't forget about those hard surfaces that make up so much of the urban landscape. Things like pavements and rooftops. They play a huge role in the urban heat equation, but I'm curious to hear how we can actually turn them into cooling elements.
It's all about a shift in thinking and embracing innovative approaches.
Right, I'm all ears. Tell me how we can transform those heat magnets into something that actually helps cool the city down.
Let's start with pavements. Traditional asphalt and concrete, they're notorious for absorbing heat. But there are innovative approaches like permeable pavements that can change that.
Permeable pavements. I've heard of those.
They allow water to seep through instead of just running off.
Ah, so the water helps cool the pavement itself.
Exactly. And that cooler pavement then radiates less heat into the environment.
So it's a win-win. Heat mitigation and storm water management. I like it. What about rooftops?
Rooftops are a goldmine for heat mitigation. One of the most effective strategies is increasing their reflectivity, often referred to as cool roofs.
Cool roofs, cool cities. Tell me more about how those work.
They basically reflect sunlight back instead of absorbing it.
His jokes
Simple
are
but
starting to get
effective.
old.
It's amazing how we can take those traditionally heat-absorbing surfaces and turn them into active cooling elements.
It's all about looking at the urban environment with a fresh perspective and realizing that every detail, from the type of pavement we use to the color of our rooftops, can play a role in mitigating the urban heat island effect.
It's like we're redesigning the city to be more in tune with nature.
In a way, I'm starting to see maybe not necessarily repetition of the content, but repetition of the jokes.
Yeah. But it's an interesting feature because we didn't write this joke
No, we didn't.
in the paper. So this came from somewhere else.
And we're famous for whimsical statements in our papers.
Yeah, but it fits the storyline
It
of
does,
the podcast. And this is what I find is really creative. It's based on something in a paper in this case, or a set of deck of slides, and then there's something added on top of it.
Broader context.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah.
But it's not just about the physical elements themselves, right? There are also certain practices that can enhance the effectiveness of these blue-green systems.
You're absolutely right. Things like irrigation, for example, can make a big difference, especially in drier climates.
That makes sense. Water is essential for keeping those plants healthy and for that evaporative cooling we've been talking about.
Exactly. And research shows that strategically irrigating those green spaces, especially during the hottest parts of the day, can significantly enhance their cooling effects.
So it's not just about how much we water, but also when and how we do it.
Precisely. And that's another area where we're constantly learning and refining our approach. We need to find that balance between maximizing the cooling benefits without wasting precious water resources.
We discussed this on your second episode. I have to get used to that now. And I do remember we did mention that phenomena, this idea of uchimizu. So listeners, if you're more interested, you can go into Joao's episode 40, to hear about that. But it's interesting that they really structure it. I know that was the structure we took. We started with all the blue-green, then we went into the more hard gray, and then the practices, which was non-infrastructural solutions.
It's everything in there. And then, yeah, I have a smile on my face because these things that we have in the paper that has been here included in the podcast, automatic podcast, this is part of the project that we mentioned in this episode 40, the Heat Down project. And then, yeah, if we want to keep our cities green, we do need water. And in some solutions, water plays a really central role. Mm-hmm. And here we are.
Here we are. And what's interesting now is we're reaching the halfway point of this generated episode. And in comparison to the first time I did this with Lucas, we noticed that it was starting to repeat, that it was adopting a certain structure that was based on that of the paper. But here we're seeing, and this being a literature review, we're not seeing as much repetition. We're actually seeing it go straight into the structure that we wrote the paper in.
True. So just an add-on. In addition to the podcast, the NotebookLM can also generate a set of notes.
True.
And I believe, I don't know, but these notes are also the ground for the podcast.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I think if you have the notes in front of us, I think we could anticipate what's coming next.
Yeah. But that would take the fun away from
us.
Yeah.
So it will be not as funny as it is now.
Let's not do that.
Let's
continue.
Especially as water scarcity becomes an increasing concern in many parts of the world.
Exactly. And on that note, it's worth considering where that irrigation water comes from in the first place.
Right. We wouldn't want to be depleting our drinking water supplies just to keep our parks green.
Exactly. There are some great opportunities to utilize alternative water sources, like rainwater harvesting or capturing and reusing gray water.
So it's all about finding ways to close the loop, using water more efficiently and sustainably.
Couldn't agree more. And another practice that can make a surprisingly big difference is surface watering.
Surface watering? You mean just spraying down those pavements and rooftops?
Pretty much. Sometimes it's called urban sprinkling, and it can be incredibly effective at cooling things down.
It sounds almost too simple. But does it really work?
It can be surprisingly effective. It's not a new idea either. Think of those traditional courtyard fountains or the Japanese practice of ukimazu, sprinkling water on the streets to cool things down.
It's amazing how these ancient practices are now being validated by modern science.
It really is. And it reinforces this idea that we need to work with nature, not against it, when we're designing our cities.
I couldn't agree more. And speaking of working with nature, the research also mentioned something called ventilation corridors, which is a new one for me. What are those all about?
They're essentially pathways that allow cooler air to flow through the city.
So, strategically placed green spaces, or even building layouts that encourage airflow.
Exactly. It's about designing the city to breathe better. These corridors can channel cooler air from surrounding areas, like parks or bodies of water, into those hotter urban cores.
I can imagine that being especially important at night, when the temperature difference between those areas is most pronounced.
Exactly. And it's especially crucial in cities that don't have natural features like hillsides or a coastline that naturally facilitate airflow.
So even without those natural advantages, we can still design for better ventilation.
Absolutely. It just requires a more deliberate and strategic approach.
For me, again, this was one of the key aspects of the paper. This planning aspect. How do we bring these different solutions together? And how we can retrofit our cities or build new cities, taking these opportunities into place.
No, very true. And they touched upon the night, but not in the context that you were hoping.
No. And we were just laughing or smiling a couple of minutes ago because this aspect on water on impervious surfaces and so on, this is something that we've been discussing, something that we've been working on, something that is in the paper, of course, but we could have used these words to explain what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
Something for future reference, indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely.
And it really highlights the need for collaboration between different disciplines like urban planners, architects, and landscape designers.
This is also fascinating. It really underscores the need to move beyond simply planting a few trees and embrace this more multi-layered strategic approach to urban heat mitigation.
I couldn't agree more. And that's precisely what the Probes paper emphasizes.
But with so many options on the table, it can feel a bit overwhelming. Where do we even begin?
That's where prioritization comes in.
So how do we decide which strategies to implement first? What factors do we need to consider?
That's a great question, and one that we'll definitely delve into as we continue our deep dive into the world of blue-green systems.
Okay, so prioritization. Where do we even start with all these amazing blue-green options?
I feel like I've heard this on the Generated podcast before, where they somehow indicate that now is a good point for an ad break. And I feel like this is also the point where we might start to see either the information coming together in a very weaved fashion, or we may start to see the episode go much broader. This was certainly what we saw in the previous episode with Lucas. Or, yeah, we'll just we'll see a lot more repetition as well.
Mm-hmm. Can be. Also, if we look into the structure of the paper, we can see also something along these lines, right?
True.
Because we put together the big picture of the problem, what the problem is.
Yes.
And then we go to the specifics of the possible solutions or solutions that are possible available. And then we just open up again towards the end. How can we make these things to work?
And now we're coming to that so-called detailed discussion section after having reviewed all the different technologies, practices, measures, etc.
Yep.
So let's see what they have to say.
It's like a giant game of city planning Tetris.
I like that analogy. It really is about strategically placing those pieces, just like in Tetris. And just like in the game, in city planning, we need to make those decisions based on a solid understanding of the playing field.
So no more just randomly adding green spaces wherever it seems like a good idea.
Definitely not. It's not about greenwashing. The Probst paper really emphasizes using data to drive these decisions. Things like heat maps to pinpoint those areas with the greatest need.
So data-driven decisions, not just gut feelings.
Exactly. It's targeted intervention, not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Makes sense. So where are those heat islands usually hiding? Densely populated areas, I'd imagine?
Often, yeah, but not always. Industrial zones can be real hotspots, too. Think about all those large, dark surfaces baking in the sun all day.
Oh, right. I hadn't thought about that.
And even some residential areas, especially those lacking tree cover or with older infrastructure, can experience significant heat stress.
So we really need to look at the data to get the full picture.
Exactly. Identify the hotspots, then tailor the blue-green solutions accordingly. It's like being an urban heat detective.
Urban Tetris.
Another good analogy.
I just got the theme song running in my head. And urban heat detective. I mean, it's fascinating how it's using all these creative analogies to, I guess, to draw in your attention as well.
Yeah, but this is what I was thinking as well before. They're using easy language to draw the attention of the listener.
True.
Just to bring the listener into the story. And then, you can be a heat detector, urban heat detective. What does it mean? Well, it doesn't exist, but person can relate easily to that.
Yeah, I guess it's cognitive dissonance as well.
Yeah.
People will start to visualize it and realize, hang on, this is strange. And then they get drawn in even more. I saw your reaction when you heard the term greenwashing, and then they went in favor of something you like very much, which is data-driven.
Yeah. Again, this thing should be written and clearly written in the paper.
Mm-hmm.
That we have tools, that we have data, sensors that can really support identification of the hotspots and where we should intervene to really reduce the heat.
Indeed.
But they really do it in a very easy way. So basically, it's kind of a storyteller. These podcasts, storyteller about something that is important. And it's based on data, based on science, based on research and so on. But then kind of summarizing. I don't know how far we are from the end.
10 minutes.
I don't know. I haven't tried this thing. If NotebookLM we could specify the length of the podcast. So imagine that we ask similar exercise in 3 minutes.
I was going to say 3 minutes. 3-minute pitch or attention span.
Wow. This would be summarizing and condensing all these, which is lots of, I agree with that. Yeah, exactly. In 3 minutes speech. Maybe it's not a podcast, just a
monologue.
A talk, monologue. Wow.
That would be insane.
So maybe
Google,
it
if you're listening
exists.
to this, take this on as a suggestion from us. Please do. Yes. Let's keep going.
I like that. Urban heat detectives. On the case.
On the case.
So once we've found those hot spots, what's next?
Well, we need to consider the specific needs and characteristics of each area. A solution that works in a bustling downtown might not be the best fit for a quiet residential neighborhood.
Like different strokes for different folks, even in urban planning.
Wow.
Exactly. In a densely built-up area, you might prioritize green roofs or vertical gardens. Space is at a premium, right?
Yeah, not a lot of room for sprawling parks in those areas.
Exactly. Whereas in a more spread-out suburb, a network of parks and green corridors might be more effective.
So each area needs a tailored approach. Are there any universal guidelines we can follow? Or are we always starting from scratch?
Well, each project is unique, but some fundamental principles apply.
Always want the simple
Understanding the
solution.
local climate is crucial.
Of course, a solution that works in a rainforest isn't going to thrive in the desert.
Exactly. Water availability, sunlight, wind patterns, these all play a role. We need to work with the climate, not against it.
And I imagine those considerations go beyond just the climate itself, right? Things like existing infrastructure, the local community, even the cultural context.
Absolutely. We need to think about how these systems integrate with what's already there. Can we incorporate existing trees? Can we create spaces that serve multiple purposes? And crucially, we need to involve the community.
Right. We can't just impose these systems on people.
Exactly. Community engagement is crucial, from planning to maintenance. We want spaces that are not just functional, but also welcoming and culturally relevant.
It's about creating a sense of ownership, right? So people are invested in the long-term success of these projects.
You hit the nail on the head. That sense of ownership
That's
is
the
essential.
second time.
This is so much more than just adding some green to a city. It's this intricate dance between data analysis, design, social equity, community engagement.
It is. It's a multifaceted challenge. And Provost and their team, they also highlight the importance of long-term thinking.
Oh, interesting. What do they mean by that?
Well, it's about moving beyond short-term piecemeal solutions. We need to consider how these systems will evolve as the city grows and changes.
So designing for the city of the future, not just today's city.
Exactly. How will we ensure ongoing maintenance? How will these systems adapt to climate change? These are critical questions.
All the things you'd love to hear. This must be music to your ears.
Exactly, Peter. This is what we were talking for quite some time within the scope of the Heat Down project. Also in our episode before, we touched on these few things and what is needed, infrastructure, maintenance and monitoring, long-term planning and so on.
So it's all coming back to light. And I do remember we did put these in as reminders for the readers that it is, not just one size fits all. The long term is so important when you're thinking about planning blue-green infrastructures.
Yes, and there's another thing that they mentioned, should be in the paper as well, which is, again, planning this city, this space planning, these different contexts, different solutions. And yeah, I think... I'm saving my sentence to the very end. I cannot say this thing yet.
I'm enjoying the urban Tetris.
Yes.
Let's see what else they have to say.
It's a whole other level of planning and foresight.
It is. It's about the legacy we're creating, building a sustainable future for generations to come.
It's inspiring, but also a bit daunting. It feels like a fundamental shift in how we think about our cities.
It is a significant shift, but a necessary one. And the good news is there are cities already leading the way.
Oh, I'd love to hear about some success stories. Who's getting it right?
Well, Singapore is a prime example. They've really embraced this idea of a city in a garden. Vertical gardens, green roofs, even those amazing super trees.
Super trees. I'll have to look those up.
They
Super
collect
trees.
rainwater, generate solar energy. They're incredible.
It's like they've woven blue-green principles into the very DNA of the city. Any other examples?
Copenhagen's another inspiring case. They've really embraced the blue-green systems, canals, waterfront parks, even a harbor bath.
Integrating water into the city in such a beautiful and functional way.
And they've also got an ambitious cloudburst management plan using green spaces and water features to mitigate flooding.
So they're building resilience to climate change as well.
Exactly. They're showing what's possible when we rethink our relationship with nature.
It's inspiring, but I imagine there are challenges too. What are some of the obstacles cities face implementing these systems?
Well, space is a big one, especially in densely populated areas. Finding room for large parks or water bodies can be tough.
So we need to get creative with those smaller scale solutions. Green roofs, vertical gardens.
Exactly, maximizing the potential of every square foot. And then there's cost. These systems can require a significant upfront investment.
That's always a challenge, balancing short-term budgets with long-term benefits.
It is. But it's important to emphasize the economic returns. Reduced energy costs, lower healthcare costs from better air quality, increased property values.
So making the economic case for these investments.
Exactly.
Singapore and Copenhagen.
What I found intriguing for the Copenhagen case, it has nothing to do with heat.
Yeah. But I remember we
had
talked
this thing
about
there,
the water holding pavements that were in Copenhagen. But in a way, you're right. But I mean, they were doing lots of blue-green infrastructures.
But they were talking about flood protection, bathing in the harbor, and so on. These examples were not really related to heat that they brought up.
You could see it was starting to go into broader context.
Yeah.
So those super trees, we never spoke about the super trees. I think we did mention Singapore, but we didn't speak about super trees.
No.
But certainly, I mean, a very relevant example, I would say, when you're talking about urban heat.
Definitely, yeah. Singapore, but the way they shaped the example of Copenhagen in Denmark, it's a little bit surprising to me.
But I do remember that the pervious pavements examples, I think, originated from, or we did mention the implementation in Copenhagen, which I guess it would have been sort of a bait for the AI to then go into that detail.
Exactly, yeah. This is where I think this AI thing can fail. Takes keyword Copenhagen, water and green.
Yes.
And then goes and picks an example that is not necessarily related to what we have in the paper or related to the topic we are discussing on the document.
This is true. Very interesting side note. I've been doing this while we were just discussing. The word Copenhagen is nowhere to be found in the actual document. So it's interesting how the AI got to that. I think we do mention anything associated with it, but I guess that became an invitation for the AI to go into that.
Yeah.
So let's see what other surprises await us in the last 6-ish minutes of this recording.
And don't forget the social and environmental returns. Healthier, happier, more resilient communities. Those have value too.
Absolutely. Okay, so space and cost. What other challenges are there?
Ongoing maintenance. These systems need care to thrive. Someone's got to water the plants, maintain the green roofs, keep those water features clean.
It's not a build it and forget it kind of thing?
Definitely not. It takes dedicated resources and personnel and a long-term commitment from everyone involved.
So community engagement plays a role here too.
A big role. Involving residents in the care of these systems not only shares the workload, but also fosters that sense of ownership.
Creating a real connection between people and the green spaces around them.
Precisely. And of course, we need to consider potential unintended consequences. Like some worry that water features might create breeding grounds for mosquitoes.
Oh, right. That's a valid concern.
It is. But careful design and management can address those issues. Moving water discourages mosquito breeding. Regular monitoring and eco-friendly treatments can also help.
So anticipating potential problems and finding proactive solutions.
Exactly. And that brings us to another important point. Ongoing research. We've learned a lot, but there's still much more to discover.
What are some of the key areas where further research is needed?
So it's interesting that over the last bits, they've touched upon the multifunctionality and also the potential pitfalls like the mosquitoes. And that's something that I think it's nice to see that they're weaving that back together from all the different systems that we brought in. And that could be a reason why Copenhagen came in the first place, because they're starting to move into other functions and the use of such systems more broadly.
Definitely. I like the way they put the things together. After these 20-something minutes of created podcast, you start having the feeling that some repetitions here and there.
Definitely.
The words they use, but also the ideas they repeat from time to time. But they are not doing a bad job.
I made this comment last time as well. We say they, but it literally is one AI tool.
It's a it.
Yeah. Well, I guess we have to ask AI what its pronoun is. Let's go and finish this off and see what else there is.
Well, developing better models to predict how these systems will perform under different climate scenarios is crucial.
So how rising temperatures or changing rainfall patterns might impact these systems.
Exactly. And we need models that are adaptable to different urban contexts. A coastal city faces different challenges than a landlocked one.
Right. One size doesn't fit all.
Definitely not. And another key area is optimizing these systems for multiple benefits.
Those win-win solutions we talked about earlier.
Exactly. How can a green roof, for example, also provide habitat for wildlife, capture rainwater, or even generate solar energy?
pushing the boundaries of what these
More
systems
functions.
can do.
Precisely. And it requires collaboration across different fields: engineers, ecologists, architects, social scientists, even artists and community members working together.
The more diverse the perspectives, the more innovative the solutions.
Absolutely. It's an exciting time to be working in this field. It feels like we're on the
Indeed.
cusp of a real paradigm shift in urban design.
Moving beyond just concrete and steel towards integrating nature into every aspect of city life.
Exactly. Recognizing that nature isn't separate from our cities, but an essential part of what makes them livable.
It's a whole new way of thinking about our relationship with the natural world. But before we get too philosophical, let's bring it back to the practical. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, but there's still so much more to explore. After a short break, we'll delve into the world of
here's the ad
blue-green
break.
innovation. What are the cutting-edge technologies and approaches shaping the cities of tomorrow?
Sounds good. Let's take a break and then dive into the future of blue-green systems.
So there's more to come. It's good. Research
Okay.
is happening.
That was so strange that they did that.
Yeah. My take on these podcasts that we have to emphasize that automatically generated by this NotebookLM tool. It's a good appetizer, but there's science and numbers in the paper.
Yeah.
There's more. Basically, this is my message. There's more in the
There's a
paper
lot
than
more.
these. But it's definitely a good appetizer here.
Definitely. So let's see what these last 3 minutes have. If they said they're going to take a short break, I'm very curious now. Most likely a summarizing discussion around everything that they've covered.
Okay, we're back, ready to explore those cutting-edge blue-green innovations. What's on the horizon?
Get ready for some serious inspiration.
Oh boy.
One trend I'm particularly excited about is integrating AI and machine learning into these systems.
AI and nature. I'm intrigued, but struggling to
did mention
picture.
that.
How does that actually work?
Imagine a network of sensors throughout the city constantly collecting data. Temperature, humidity, soil moisture, air quality, you name it.
So big data meets Mother Nature.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then AI steps in, crunching all that data, along with things like weather forecasts, to make smart decisions.
Like what kinds of decisions?
Think irrigation schedules, adjusting water flow in canals, even predicting potential issues like mosquito breeding hotspots.
So instead of fixed schedules or guesswork, we have this intelligent system constantly adapting.
Exactly. It's about making nature-based solutions even smarter and more efficient.
Okay, so AI can fine-tune those existing systems. Anything else?
We're even talking about personalizing these systems for individual users. Imagine a park bench that adjusts its temperature based on your body heat.
Whoa, that sounds futuristic.
This is futuristic.
Like a personalized
indeed.
microclimate.
Exactly. Or a green wall that purifies the air around you as you walk by. The possibilities are incredible.
Pretty mind-blowing stuff.
Yeah.
But with all this tech, we can't forget the ecological foundation of these systems, right?
Well, of course not. Technology should enhance nature, not replace it. We need to find that balance, respecting the wisdom of the natural world.
That balance is key. It reminds me of something else the Probes paper emphasized, the need for clear guidelines for implementing these systems.
Absolutely. With all this innovation, having a solid framework is more crucial than ever. Standardized methods for assessing performance, ensuring proper maintenance.
So it's not enough just to build these systems. We need to make sure they work as intended long term.
Exactly. Researchers,
It's good that they touched
policymakers,
upon
everyone needs to work together, sharing knowledge and best practices.
It's a collaborative effort. And ongoing monitoring is important too, right?
Right.
To see what's working, what's not, and make adjustments.
Absolutely. It's all about continuous learning and improvement. And the most exciting part, we're just scratching the surface of what's possible.
This has been eye-opening. I'm walking away feeling hopeful, like we can actually tackle this urban heat challenge.
Oh, that's
I
nice.
feel that
We're
way
glad
too.
that we gave
and
you that
remember, everyone has a role to play. Advocate for green policies, volunteer in your local park, spread the word.
Every action counts. It's about creating a future where cities aren't just concrete jungles, but thriving ecosystems. What a vision.
It is, and it's within our reach. If we work together, embrace innovation, and learn from nature.
I'm ready to dive in. Thanks for all these insights today. This deep dive into blue-green systems has been truly inspiring.
The pleasure was all mine. Let's turn our cities into those cool oases, one blue-green step at a time.
And for all our listeners, take a look around your own city. Where are those opportunities to
I'll
integrate
use that
nature?
one.
Yes.
What can you do to make a difference? Keep those questions in mind as we wrap up this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious.
So if you ever doing a campaign and you need slogans, you can certainly listen to the latter half of this.
Yes, definitely. What I find, so that the break is really nicely set.
True.
Because they then go completely wild, I think.
Yeah.
And I don't remember that we have these benches.
I don't remember that
adjusting
either.
temperature, but why not? And then they do this exercise of being completely explorative and crazy, but then come back. And I think they are using the conclusion section
to
really wrap up and highlight a few important topics.
That's true.
Very well done.
I mean, NotebookLM, as far as I understand, has been optimized to not hallucinate, unlike many other large language models, which can mean that it's often a trade-off then on creativity. It becomes more of a summarizer compared to a completely creative, generative artificial intelligence. But here you're seeing it feels like there's been a balance struck there. So it's just not a straightforward summarizer.
No, there's something added on to the paper, to the structure of the paper, to the story of the paper.
I mean, it's powered by Gemini 2.0, but in a way still optimized for that purpose.
What I like is also that we have 2 additional voices advocating for blue-green systems in cities.
Yeah, definitely.
After these 20-something minutes.
One blue-green step at a time.
Yes, that's a good one.
What are your general impressions?
No, it just confirms the very impressive feeling I had first time I've seen NotebookLM in practice. I think it's a good summarizer. Here and there, it's not completely accurate. It's generic. It doesn't replace reading the details of the paper, in my opinion. But it's entertaining. It's a good entry point to this topic specifically, but every topic will work out very well as this one, I think. It's a good exercise, and why not doing such a thing in topics that are a little bit outside our comfort zone, and then put the earphones and then walk home with something new, generated out of easy language and
a practicality thing where sometimes you don't want to read it. You just want to be able to listen to it. And it's definitely much better than, I guess, if you just vocalized a written paper where they also start reading the footers and the headers of the PDF document. That's not fun.
And it sounds a real conversation with some mechanical words and expressions. That if we can abstract from these helpers, it looks really real, almost too real.
So very believable?
Very believable.
Very believable. So I guess, overall, where do you see the potential of AI going forward, and what would you like to see? I mean, this is just the start of everything. We've had ChatGPT, we have had this now. We are starting to see video generators, but what's the potential going forward? How would you envision an ideal world where we coexist with AI?
I think AI can help us in many tedious tasks. So, for example, make a summary of a book. Here we are. We can do it already. This is the positive side. We can also use AI to create something. And this is where it's good, but this is where things become a little bit dangerous. Because we can also imagine to do this exercise with something that is completely fake, and then we listen to the podcast and it looks real.
Misinformation.
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
always a danger in that.
And just to finish up this reflection on the future of AI, it will be very important that we as humankind do not lose the skills that are unique to us. Maybe you are sharing now with AI, which is creativity, critical skills, and so on.
Yes.
This will be, I hope, something that we find ways to still take care of, that we learn, that we practice, not just delegate everything to the AI.
I certainly couldn't agree more with that. So, I think it's maintaining that sense of, I guess, what makes us human. But I guess sometimes with these technologies, you start to question, what does it mean to be human? That's really an existence question. Curious to see how it goes, but I hope you enjoyed this little experiment. Certainly doing it the second time, it was quite interesting to see some differences, I guess, but also in a way, understanding better what to expect from this kind of tool, and then also AI in general.
definitely a good experience. My expectation was not met because they didn't talk about the
nighttime.
The nighttime and the daytime and large water bodies. Maybe it's not in the paper.
We certainly mentioned that in the paper.
Yeah, I think so too. But they didn't pick, or it did not pick this aspect. But in general, was nice. Yeah. Well done.
So,
Peter, good. Thanks for the invitation, and also nice talk and nice comments on top of an AI generated reality.
And thank you very much for joining me on this experiment, João. And listeners, if you like this kind of episode or these kinds of series, do let me know. But I hope you enjoyed this little experiment as well. And yeah, we look forward to doing it again. And with that, I bid you farewell.
If you like this episode or the show in general, follow it on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts from to be notified of the latest release as soon as it becomes available. Check out the show notes and many other episodes over at petermbach.com/podcast or join the LinkedIn group and share your thoughts.
The podcast's intro and outro song for this mini-series is called Funky Fortune by Danny Shields.
Stay tuned for our next episode in this mini-series to find out more about how AI may or may not tackle the grand challenges